bits flowing today. I think we are going live. There we are on twitch.tv/scanlime and on YouTube on the scanlime-in-progress channel. And direct from the source, you can also get the stream at live.diode.zone/scanlime. Welcome back. We've got a bit of an open-ended co-working stream here on Saturday, but at the very least I wanted to get a couple of topics in. One being some letters, actually, some like packages that we got in the mail, and another being some work on this video processing tool that I've been using for one of the projects for this sort of Isopod related summary videos. And that's kind of an opportunity to do some hacking around on C++ computer vision code and trying to understand the APIs behind the libraries behind FFmpeg. So that's kind of the direction this might go in. But I also wanted to keep this a bit more conversational, if that's possible. One of the reasons I've been having trouble doing the streams lately is feeling like it doesn't fulfill kind of any of the necessary goals for me, and I need to like tweak things in order to get them to work a little better. Because one reason to do the streams is to be collecting footage that I then edit down into future videos. But right now I really have a lot of projects that have plenty of footage, and so if I'm trying to focus a little, and focusing would be really good for me right now, then it would actually be nice to not collect as much new footage and to be more editing down what I've got and collecting footage which is not necessarily like project stuff, but is more like kind of scripted narrative related stuff that goes along with the project footage. Anyway, we can switch from the boring title card to the thing that actually lets you see my cat, which is really the important part, right? This is what you're all here for, the cat. If you haven't seen this whole, oops, I thought I was spilling coffee on myself, but there's a sticky note stuck to the bottom of the coffee cup. Yeah, this whole setup is my cat enjoying his favorite heated mat there on my desk, and then there's kind of a flying camera that's been one of our ongoing projects. That's Tuco Flyer, keeping an eye on him. It has trouble operating near the edges of the room, which is often embarrassing because that's where I'm filming. It's one of the limitations in this design. A lot of ways around that, but we don't need to make this like a super deep dive on the cat robot necessarily. It's become one of those projects where there's tons more work to do, but it works well enough that I've been mostly leaving it alone. But yeah, as I was saying, like the two goals I usually have for these streams are to collect footage that I then edit down into like a more produced video, and then to have more of a like hangout time with this community here, all of you fine folks. Hello. So I feel like sometimes I can get both of those two things at the same time, and like that often works pretty well when we have a new piece of hardware to dig into. Especially when it's something that one of you have sent in, it's really great to be able to dig into it on camera together to get a bunch of footage. But then that often leaves me in this situation where now I have the majority of the work on that project still to do. Like the pre-planning and the footage, like the stuff that you see me do and the stuff that I've already done by the time we have our live stream. Like that's only a tiny piece of the project, and this often leaves me with a backlog of doing the rest of it, so that's been kind of hard. And then compounding that lately, when I actually tried to make progress on these edits, I often find myself just stuck because I find the material so boring. And that's like maybe a longer discussion, but I have a really hard time just being excited about technology for technology's sake these days. And so often, even when I'm just trying to explain some of these projects, like IRL, like here in real life, to a friend, I just get depressed by even the prospect of explaining the thing because I don't know how to explain it in a way that won't just personally bore me a lot. And so that's been really sapping at my motivation to make videos because I don't know how to actually make this stuff interesting. But as frustrating as that is, at least I think it points the way toward a solution, which is that I need to find some plot. Well, a lot of the problem is that a lot of these videos don't even have plots, so like a way to add narrative to videos that aren't necessarily usually a narrative experience would be nice. But trying to figure out how to do that in a way that fits what I'm personally capable of and what I have the materials for here, and maybe I can make some of this stuff more fun. But the problem, I guess, like the problem that opens up then is that a lot of that will involve then recording even more footage, and will mean that the project footage that I've got so far is actually even less of the entire project, really. So yeah, I need to figure out how to do that. But then, so separately, I've been wanting these streams to be a way of recording footage for these finished projects. I've also been wanting it to be sort of a hangout experience. I guess the problem I have personally with a lot of those experiences is that I don't know how to make the objective turn out to be something that I actually want. Like, I found myself in this situation many times where I find myself building something or working towards some goal, and then I get there only to realize, oh, actually this is terrible. And which isn't to say that I always have a bad experience with interacting with people online, but I feel like often what I'm doing here is working toward this goal, which I expect to be some kind of community building, and then immediately finding myself overloaded by the communication and overloaded by all the people. And it doesn't take much to overload me with communication. Like, especially these last several years, it's been really hard for me to actually find positive interactions with pretty much anyone. So it's almost like I need to find some kind of gimmick for that too. It's like, okay, well, if we just sit and talk about our feelings, it's going to be really depressing, so maybe we should just play a card game together or something. Which is, I think, why, reverse engineering video games seemed like such a great idea for a while, and I found myself working on that. But then, of course, you build community around that, and it turns out a lot of the people who are interested in video game reverse engineering are not actually good in the long run, and I don't end up having successful friendships with them, and it turns out a lot of them are just manipulative assholes, and so I don't know where that goes. I'm not gonna find the complete absence of jerks anywhere I go, and goodness knows, I'm sure in a lot of circumstances I'm just the jerk. So I need to find, where do I find, a community that feels positive for everyone involved and feels like something that generates a nurturing environment and isn't just immediately toxic. And I don't know where that is. Like, there are examples of that out there. Like, it seems like the community around the Adafruit projects seems to be mostly good, but I also find it hard to get excited about most of that because a lot of it is this kind of like unvarnished excitement over technology or over fandoms or something else, and when that's the source of enthusiasm, I don't know how to take part in that, really. So I don't know really how to find that community welcoming personally, so I don't know. And then maybe there's, then there's the other thing where, if you can't find a community, maybe you're the one who has to make it. So I find myself in that position sometimes, but then, immediately overwhelmed, of course. Like, oh, let's all hang out and work on something or other, and then as soon as there are more than like 3 people in the room, I've got to find an excuse to go. So I don't know where that goes. We can try to hang out. I mean, that's I think one reason to bring up the co-working. It's like, I think these streams have been successful in some manner for both me and for some of you when we've done stuff that we would do anyway. Like, you can put this on in the background and keep working, and I can work on a project, and maybe we can talk occasionally, and sometimes that works out. It doesn't feel as much like we're doing a thing together as other things, but it's way better than being alone, right? Yeah, and then there's, the opportunity for actual conversation. And so that's, it can be really hit or miss, like in real time with the chat, because, I don't usually schedule these streams, which is something else to talk about. Maybe if I scheduled them more, we would have more of an ongoing dialogue. As it is, we have these asynchronous messages sometimes where somebody emails me or leaves a comment, and then that often just triggers my social anxiety right away, though I have these very conflicting feelings where I'm often just really genuinely interested in and sometimes desperate for feedback about what I'm doing, because it can be so hard to just feel like I'm like yelling into a void most of the time. But sometimes when I actually get feedback, it's like a giant novel, and I'm just immediately overwhelmed by it. So I found myself in that situation recently. But yeah, maybe we can work through that together. Get through some of that on this stream. Hello, everyone. Hey, Vince, hey, James, Tino. Tuco's just hanging out on this mat, which is nice. He's within range of the camera. He likes that desk enough that maybe I should just put a higher definition camera just right there. So I have done a little bit of video editing lately successfully. I've been trying to make some progress on. So I think the next project at this point is going to be a video about the little 4-button channel switcher thing that I've got on my desk. Actually, I should be more methodical about how I collect footage for this, but maybe let's just press record here in case this is useful. So yeah, the video where I made this little critter on the desk. I don't think I've had video of just me poking at it like this. I don't know. It's pretty satisfying. It has a nice smooth wood enclosure. Nice glow through these vintage LED buttons. The buttons originally had these fairly old school dim 3mm LEDs, and I didn't have any modern 3mm to replace it with, so I ended up taking some surface mount white LEDs and sticking them in there on some makeshift legs, and that seemed to work pretty well. So yeah, I think the next editing project I'm trying to focus on is this thing, and I'm still not entirely sure how to put that one together. I find myself really bored by the idea of just playing it completely straight and just having it be, like there's this style that exists on video for, like, look, I did a project and here's the process. Let me make it just visually delicious for you as we explore the process of making this together. And there's some good examples of it. Like, I think my favorite might be ClickSpring, if any of you follow that YouTube channel. They do clock making, like home shop, brass turning, metalworking, and it's I think some people would experience that channel as like a how-to channel. Like, it's like how you go to a bookstore and there are these like glossy books about woodworking and making your own furniture and coffee tables and stuff, and like I think some people would go and get a book like that because they want to make their own coffee table, and then some people would get a book like that because they want these really good pictures of someone else making their own coffee table that they can enjoy. So I think both kinds of people probably enjoy those videos a lot, but I think the audience of people who are not necessarily going to make their own clock but want like really good juicy pictures of someone else making a clock is probably bigger, so you end up with that kind of skewing like how the videos are consumed and distributed to some extent. And I don't know, I mean, I find that style interesting. I've certainly gone for that before in some of my videos, but I often I don't know if I've like really focused on it consistently enough. I don't know if that's what I want to go for though, because I think part of what I'm so burned out on is this idea that technology is just this thing that we should just like kind of uncritically use as an aesthetic experience only. So I don't know. I could try to just put all my other feelings aside and just make something that's purely aesthetic about technology, but I don't know if I'd really be as motivated as if I could find some other way to present it. And this doesn't mean that I want to make like, I don't know. I've also found myself personally just I've been trying to change this recently. Like I'm trying to get over this fear of the talking head video, because there's this certain kind of video that I feel is like really popular on YouTube, where there's like a clickbait headline and a clickbait thumbnail, and then it's somebody trying to persuade you about something that I don't even know if I want a video to persuade me about. Like I'd much rather like read a Wikipedia article or like a novel or something in most cases. But there's this whole category of things like that I find myself like maybe avoiding a little harder than I need to. So I don't know. Maybe there's some middle ground where there's a way to have a video that is kind of that aesthetic experience of making a thing, but then also has a little bit of that kind of narrative element without making it feel like a boring, preachy, talky head video that I would personally find annoying too. So yeah, I don't know. I've been thinking about that. The part of what's depressing though is that whole idea of like how do I go back to square one and reformulate what these videos and what the channel is about, like none of that really intersects especially much with the giant pile of footage I find myself sitting on. So like whatever route I take, there's still a lot more work involved in actually putting out a video, and I don't know how to actually do that work on my own a lot of the time because I don't have a lot of motivation, and then I don't know how to share that work a lot of the time because a lot of it just involves stuff that is not exciting to share, like research and writing and planning and especially editing. I've done a little bit of editing on stream, but I don't know that it's worked especially well. Yeah, I was just looking at chat. James also says that ClickSpring teaches techniques that can be useful for things like historical recreation and historical recreation or recreation. Yeah. Well, that's the thing, though. It's like, what I really find myself lacking as far as motivation is like, why am I doing this? Like, the really pragmatic reason, like the reason that I've had this entire time, which has seemed insufficient, is that I'm doing it because it's the only thing I really feel like I know how to do anymore. Like, I feel like if I just worked for another software company doing some thing like what I was doing before, I would just run into exactly the same kinds of walls as far as, I mean, I don't know, maybe I feel like I hit these same kinds of walls as far as like motivation and purpose no matter what work I go into, so maybe some of those are just inside and I don't need to like keep wandering, but it has felt like I haven't really found the right thing yet. You know, when I was working like every job I've had, even the ones I've been at for a long time, there was some kernel of not even just moderate, but pretty intense dissatisfaction there. And so, like, certainly at many stages, if I had to or if I wanted to, I could have just stuck it out despite that kernel of dissatisfaction. But given the opportunity, it's been interesting to try to pick at that and to see if there's a way that I can do something that feels less pointless. And so, I mean, to be honest, a lot of what's kept me going at, the videos and the streams and like what I've been doing lately, it's really momentum. It's because, well, I'm doing this because I set out to do this a while ago, and people still seem to be supporting me at it, and I'm going to keep trying, but that source of motivation behind it has been really, really thin for a while now. And when I talk to a lot of people about this, they just tell me I should quit. And my inclination is to resist that, partly because of just how much time and how much of myself and, how much of just my life I've invested in making things and trying to share that process with people. Like, it seems like this thing that I'm doing right now, where I'm making videos and trying to have live streams and trying to have some some process of sharing that with people, like that, I can't think of a better way to use my life so far in the service of other people than that. But maybe that isn't the way to go. Maybe I should just like give up on technology more fully and just do something a lot more different. And but that's like when people say, "Oh, you should just give up on this." Like that's really what it comes down to, is like I feel like I've got to the thing that I was trying to get to with regard to using my past to do something productive for people. But if this isn't working, maybe I go much further out. And I don't know. That just involves a really big change and burning some significantly larger bridges than I usually like to burn. So it's like when people are just like, "Oh, you should just quit." It's like, well, and it's not even like I'm not used to burning bridges. Like I've just like walked out on like really large parts of my life before on many occasions. And so it's not like I've been resistant to do that. It's more like I've had a history of doing that for the past like decade or so, and I'm wondering if that's actually the right idea in this particular case, in this particular thing that I feel like I've worked this hard to get to. So, I don't know. Because yeah, part of me certainly would love to just go out in the middle of nowhere, just like sell or give away everything I have, live out in the middle of nowhere, never talk to anyone, have like 6 cats or something. I don't know. But yeah, part of me feels like, well, that's just a different way to kill myself than the other ways I've considered. Because I don't think I would really thrive out there. I think I would actually just die of a different kind of loneliness. So, like, fundamentally the problem is that I don't actually know how to not feel extremely lonely, even when I'm around other people, even when I'm around people in person, even when I'm around them on the internet. So anytime I create a community, it doesn't actually feel like community. With some exceptions. I mean, I've had communities that have felt like communities, but then it turns out, oh, that's because they were abusive. That's because the feeling that I was looking for actually probably doesn't even exist, and the people who kind of lit up that same perception in my mind were the people who were trying to take advantage of me. So I don't know. How to have healthy community around technology when technology itself seems like it's intrinsically unhealthy, right? I mean, it seems like Adafruit does that. They're healthy in a lot of ways, but I think a lot of that is like by omission. Like it's not like they're great at confronting the hard problems. They present a pleasant experience while mostly avoiding the hard problems. It's like the kind of the like liberal politics of electronics or something. And so like, yeah, how do you teach electronics in a way that is like anti all of the negative effects that electronics has? Like, you can't have all of that. How do you find a good corner to pick at? And I mean, so I think Adafruit found a good corner to pick at. Like, they try to make it more welcoming for more people, and I think that's done a lot of good. I guess I just don't know where my niche is yet. I'm sorry, I appreciate the advice. Magnus gives the advice that I should do whatever makes me happy. I get that advice a lot, and right now it's 100% useless because none of this really makes me happy. And if I were to just give up on it completely, like, that goes back to the question of, well, how large of a bridge fire do I set right now? And like, I'm used to burning bridges. Do I just light the rest of them on fire because I like it? I mean, I don't think I should be doing that because I feel like that's just going to leave me completely alone and with no options for anything. So I don't know. Torst asks about what about showing that creating technology can be frustrating, like showing all the mistakes along the way and the multiple tries and all that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly one aspect of the solution for sure, is that some additional degree of honesty, like showing real people on TV and not just like Instagram celebrities, like that's part of the solution, it seems. But like, what are those people doing on TV, and what are they doing that in service of, and like, what is actually behind that? Like, I still feel like I'm missing a bunch of pieces, but yeah, that seems like a direction to go in. Oh, this camera is indeed new. Yeah, I got this pretty recently, and I've only done a couple of streams with it so far. Yeah, that's intended to replace the Sony DSLR that I've been using. I still have that one, but I might sell it. And yeah, there's a lot that's nice about this one. It has a much better autofocus, but it also records in 4K, which is pretty cool. And he's wondering which bridges I might burn. I mean, well, which bridges have I already burned, and which ones could I still burn? So I feel like I've burned a bunch of bridges already in terms of like working in different kinds of jobs or with different people. Like, there was a time in my life when I found myself pretty regularly surrounded by like rich people that I could have tried to get a job from, and I just didn't want that in my life. But I didn't, you know, a different version of me might have like tried to hold my nose and figure out how I could like get something from them and like use that for something potentially good, but I just didn't want anything to do with them. I mean, there's like, I don't know. I feel like I've burned bridges as far as like art and infosec and specific communities of weirdos in the city that I live near, and but then I feel like there are other things where like it's like I have a bunch of equipment here. I could just like try to sell it all. I have a pretty good shop here. I could move away. I could I honestly, and then there's the Patreon, right? Like, I feel like I honestly don't know why I have the level of support that I have at this point. Like, I feel like people are really generous, and I don't know why. And if I were to just do something completely different and like pause the Patreon, like, I have no reason to expect that people would still support me in the future. Yeah, I mean, I used to have a really stable relationship and a really stable job, and then I burned a bunch of bridges to move to a completely different city and completely changed my life. I had a job working, and then much later on, I had a job that was pretty good, working with a bunch of people I liked on a thing that was all right, and I burned that bridge. I left, and I don't know if I would ever want a job like that again, because I feel like I tried it and it really, really didn't work. Like, it was good in some ways, but really, really bad in some other ways. And, train's pretty loud. Yeah, I like that comment that most, if not all, technology is dual use, but a lot of things are. Yeah, I mean that's like a problem with teaching in general. Is that like you teach somebody to be a more effective person, and then they go on to do something horrible. It's like, well, how much of that responsibility do you have as a teacher? And I feel like, well, it's non-zero, but you've got to minimize that to some extent to even get your job done. So. Um, Yeah, I mean, if we can have an open conversation about what we expect from technology and life, like that could be cool. I don't know really how that would work or like what format, but like I think we're going in the right direction. Yeah, definitely going in the right direction, I think. I have a complicated relationship to that. So Andy mentions that my video on Tuco Flyer that was on Reddit for a little bit. They showed it to some coworkers, and their coworkers were impressed. I feel like that has been a large component of my entire way of interacting with the internet, is that I'm just like a weird recluse that hangs out in the corner and mostly avoids people, and then occasionally I make something that a lot of people find impressive, and then that thing travels around the internet a bit, and sometimes I travel along with it and sometimes I avoid it. And I think for a while I didn't have a problem with that. Like, I just saw that as normal. Like, that was the only way I interacted with the internet, and that was the way that I expected that people in general could and maybe would interact with the internet. And I didn't, I think, notice until much later how strange that was. And I mean, even recently, that's been, some component of my online interaction. Like, I mean, I've been actually trying to like cut down on that lately, which is another bridge that I've burned. But like, I think for a while I got to feeling like a bunch of my Twitter followers were journalists who were just looking around for the next thing to blog about, or the next like thing to write an article about, or whatever, the next like clickbait, whatever. I don't know how much that was true. Like, I don't know how much people, how much of the connection between the things that I did and like stories showing up about it on like Reddit or Hackaday or whatever. Like, I don't know how much of that was journalists following me or people who already followed me that were then like submitting them or what. But I think for a while I had an okay relationship to that. I thought that like, well, that's fine. That's just the way things work on the internet. I just do things that I think are cool, and then eventually it filters through all these different people who might repost them or whatever. And then if it's cool enough, it just ends up on a site like Reddit, and then like, oh boy, I just won the internet and I got all these Reddit points, and hooray. That's never really been how it worked. Like, I think that pretty quickly turned into more of an apathy, and then more of even like a negative relationship with these sites. I would notice that usually when when stuff I did ends up on these news aggregators, it just fed into people's existing biases and fantasies, and it's not doing anything good. It's just more fuel for this fire that's been burning at the front of this train that's on these tracks that I can't do anything about. And it is the product, right? Like, when you play that game, you're just producing more stuff for the internet to get its clicks on, and for the AIs of the future to be trained on, and I don't see that as really good. And then I started seeing that as like more of an explicitly negative thing when I had this experience where I'm like 90% sure that I was part of the reason that Sarah Zhang ended up like following a bunch of the parts of Mastodon that she did when she ended up like trying out Mastodon and then like writing a Vice article about it. And just like being like seeing that happen, just I don't know, it was like I have a hard time knowing how to interact with the machinery of internet journalism in our current century, and so it just makes me want to like burn all those bridges. And so I've actually had a policy lately of blocking as many journalists and reporters and bloggers and people who post things on the internet as I can, because I don't really want my stuff to get picked up on sites like that, because I don't see it as a positive thing anymore. So I guess I'm curious if anyone else sees that as a positive. Like, why? Like, I think at some point I thought it was interesting to pick up internet points by seeing my stuff bounce around Reddit or whatever, but now I just see that as the engine of like divergent perceptions of the world. Like, it just means that people who want some stuff to see on the internet that's cool are gonna like see that, and then it'll just reinforce whatever already fits their worldview, and then they'll move on. Doesn't seem like how I want to interact with the world, and it seems like even something that I want to like opt out of to whatever extent is actually possible. I think it's even deeper than that. That I think I'm actually really frustrated by people who just kind of bounce around the world and like want to look for cool things. Like I don't know what really is at the root of that, but there's something that I find really frustrating about that. It's like cultural consumerism or something. I don't know. I need to try to figure out what that actually is. Yeah, I do find myself leaving things behind quite a bit. Like, it's a weird metaphor for that, but I've left so many kitchen appliances behind at previous homes. You know, sometimes it's been something that was mine, and then I get into a relationship, and then we break up, and I leave the thing behind, or it was a thing that we bought together. This one place I lived, I just left some stuff behind in the kitchen because it was just too hard to take at that point. Like, physically hard to actually move things out of the shared spaces and to be in the shared spaces, but also, like, I think they had just messed up a bunch of that stuff. Like, it was covered in stuff that like, I don't know. It's like, I don't want to be cleaning my traumatic ex-roommate's baking grease off of my Cuisinart, you know? So I think past me just left some of that stuff. Yeah, I've been trying to figure out what to do with just all these really discordant feelings, because it does seem like sometimes when I just talk about how messed up I feel about, you know, social or technical kind of meta issues nowadays, you know, sometimes that seems to resonate with other people, but it also seems like that dialogue is often just so separate from the, like, YouTube electronics channel cookie cutter template thing, you know? And I mean, I'm learning that that's for good reason, right? Like, I mean, I haven't gone as far as making video content that really merges social and, like, electronic-y, project-y stuff. I'm trying to figure out how to do that. Like, I think that's my goal for the next video, if I can figure it out. But even, man, even just like the barest of what seem like, you know, not even especially modern demands. It's like, oh, maybe it would be cool if you didn't assume that literally all of your viewers were men. Could we start there? Like, what decade are we in? And it's like, even stuff like that is enough to basically get me ostracized from the community of people that do electronic-y YouTube videos. So, like, I mean, that's another one of the bridges, right? And that's, like many of these bridges, as it's smoldering and I'm running down the sidewalk or whatever, I'm realizing that this was not a good bridge to be on in the first place. But then, like, well, which side of the river am I on now, and what do I want to do now? Because even as I run across the bridges as they're falling down, they still end up taking me somewhere. So yeah, there are plenty of channels that, you know, do a project and present that project well, and don't have terrible politics, at least on the surface, and that's cool. Like, that's been a good baseline. Like, that's basically been what I've been trying to do so far. But it also really does leave me feeling like, oh, I just have to boil my head for an hour before I edit videos, because I literally just need to, like, sterilize my brain. So, yeah, I don't know. There's probably a better way to do that. I was just editing this video about Tuco recently, though, and I think the key for making that editing less boring was to pick out some music, at least partway through. I try to edit in multiple phases. Like, you know, first I'll go through and just organize the footage a bit and, like, delete anything that's, like, obviously useless, and try to kind of put it in different bins to the extent that that's necessary. I'll often just throw things together into linear sequences that are useful so that I can, like, do pre-renders or, like, look at stuff, but it won't necessarily be a meaningful storyline or anything. But it also gives me an idea of just how much footage I'm looking at. And at that stage, I very regularly have just, like, multiple days worth of footage, like over 24 hours of footage to deal with in a single project. And so it's kind of daunting, and then, like, I'll edit it down even more. Even on this, like, little Tuco video I made, I had several hours of footage at this stage. Then I edited it some more, and I think I had something like 15 minutes of footage that seemed like it might be high enough quality to actually make it into the final video. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do at that point. I figured, like, oh, this is just going to be a 15-minute video. But then I found the right music for it and edited it to the music, and that just picked up the pacing quite a bit. And and then that leaves me wondering, like, well, what do I do there, and how much of it do I take on myself, you know? I feel like I've got some, you know, like, I feel like I'm alright at finding and using, like, Creative Commons background music that I'm happy with sometimes, like finding another artist out there who's already put out music that they've already given people the rights to use in videos like mine. But it would also be cool to do, like, collaboration for music at some point. I just don't even know how to approach that. Like, I'm so bad at talking to people that, like, I can't even ask the musicians I know if they'd want to do something like that, much less actually, like, seek out connections with musicians I don't know. So, but besides, like, you know, music, I feel like music would work even if I'm doing kind of like a ClickSpring style, like, eye candy, but not necessarily narrative video. But if I'm doing something with narrative, then all of a sudden that'll drive the editing to a large extent. I still probably need to do some, like, non-narrative related, like, pre-editing just to get stuff into a good state and figure out what to center the narrative around. But then, gosh, I just noticed another USB cable that Tuco's chomped on. Have I mentioned how much of a pain this cat is? I love him so much. He's my best friend, but he's such a pain, and he just keeps getting into new stuff. Like, I have this split loom protecting stuff over pretty much all the wires here to keep him from chomping on the wires, and I keep finding stuff that I've missed that he's chomped on. James says there's nothing wrong with not liking consumerism, but if people are going to be consumerist anyway, then surely it's better that they consume things that are at least about creating things. Yeah, there's like the harm reduction approach to consumerism. It's like, well, yeah, this whole framework that we're in is fundamentally consumerist, and like, goodness knows I buy a bunch of stuff, and need to produce what I'm doing here. But, even before I was videoing all this stuff, I would certainly buy plenty of objects. I think that's just the context that we find ourselves in right now, and it's really hard to escape unless you want to be a total hermit. But yeah, we can certainly reduce harm. I think one aspect of that is understanding the things that you buy more, like what goes into them in terms of labor and resources and technology. But then, then there's the kind of recycling and fixing and upcycling. What do you do with the things that you already have that you want to make last longer or work differently? I feel a little differently about the well, so there's the harm reduction in consumerism, which is understanding the things that you can buy and understanding how to make those things work better for you and be less harmful for the environment, and all those things, just how to take the thing that you're already doing and make it less bad. But then there's the whole like consuming for making, and like, I don't know about you, but I've probably bought more things for the purposes of like making and researching and developing and all that than I would have if I wasn't in this pursuit of making things. So, like, I think if you were to actually, like, I mean, I'm just bullshitting because obviously I don't have data for this, but I think if you were to actually find data for how much people consume if they identify as being a maker versus if they're not, you'd probably find that the makers consume more, just in terms of the number of like dollars they spend. And so I don't think the maker movement itself is actually harm reduction for consumerism. I think it can actually just be another force for consumerism. Not that there aren't reasons to teach people how to make stuff. I mean, to a large extent, understanding how stuff is made and understanding how to make stuff can help you understand the framework in which other things are made and how to modify them and repurpose them and keep them running longer and all the other things that are actually maybe harm reduction. But yeah, that is actually one thing that I maybe want to figure out how to talk about more in my videos, is that I don't actually see the whole like maker thing as intrinsically good. It's just another way that we can interact with some of the same power structures that we already find ourselves in for like knowledge and physical objects. Tillinen says that their dad, who's retired, is into making electronics projects, and the projects he can find online are really inspiring, and he makes things as a result, so there's at least a small upside for tech journalism. Yeah, I mean, I think the reason I find myself, it's hard for me to motivate myself around the concept of creating some arbitrary unit of inspiration without any context. I mean, it feels kind of unqualified, like energy or power. It's like I've got some energy here, and I'm going to turn the energy into a different form, and I'm going to put it out there, and people can use it. But it doesn't really exert any pressure in one direction or another. In fact, it kind of implicitly takes on the status quo and reproduces any existing structures that we have in our society. So like the people who are already going to be tinkering and making things are going to find new ways to be inspired. And I think that's where a lot of people do find some meaning in trying to make projects and like inspiring tech journalism or whatever that specifically tries to get people interested that have been underrepresented in the field. And that does seem like a useful form of potential inequality reduction. Yeah, and I mean, just as far as like goals go, I mean, what can you do with technology that is actually good? I mean, you can do a lot of specific things that solve specific problems, but it's hard to get to that point from this like 10,000-foot view of like, what do you do with technology? And then when you do start solving specific problems, then you get into all the politics of like, whose problems are you solving and why, and what resources are you applying to those problems, and who did we steal those resources from, basically. James says there's nothing wrong with making a therapy stream every once in a while if it doesn't make it into even if it doesn't make it into an edited video. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't need to edit every video. I mean, there is an overhead to streaming. It's like streaming is not free. It takes up space because I store the videos. But yeah, I mean, I don't have to worry about editing every single minute of footage I shoot, I guess. It is not often that I record a stream and then toss the recording directly into the garbage, but maybe I should do that more often. Like usually they sit around in my file server for a while at least. Oh, Dean's wondering about the shirt logo. Yeah, Kate Timken, who's often in chat. We haven't seen her around for a while because I think she's been busy, but yeah, she was doing some Switch reverse engineering a while ago, and she's also behind, or at least one of the people behind the Great Vet, which I think is actually launching like soon as a thing you can buy. So yeah, she designed this as a combination of the Colorado state flag and the open source hardware logo. Because yeah, she and I both come from Colorado, so she gave me one of these shirts. I appreciate it. Yeah, I would like to make a video specifically poking fun at the feedback loop that creators have with the algorithm when it comes to gender bias on YouTube. I'm not quite sure what angle to take from that, because I think part of the problem is I'm not really sure what audience I'm trying to reach and what I'm really trying to get across to them, and like not sure which battles to pick. I mean, I think one reason that annoying talking head YouTube is so popular is that they try to get in the head a little bit of the people they're trying to convince. So if you're making a YouTube video that's actually trying to potentially change someone's mind, you need it to be in some way clickbait that's targeted at those people. So you need to make something that kind of straddles this weird cognitive line between the people on the various sides of whatever issue you're trying to approach. And it's frustrating, right? Like I don't know if I want to get in the head of those people more than I have to, but maybe that's the next step, is learning how to approach that a bit more methodically. And then, I don't know if it's worth like specifically, like, well, if we were talking about that like gender imbalance feedback loop on YouTube, like, well, what would the real hook be? Like, would we just want to somehow get across the message that like, oh, by the way, this data is not actually reliable, and even if it was, like, why would this be a useful thing to say? We could like break it down like that, but like, who's going to watch a video like that? I think there needs to be something else to it, like some kind of narrative device, or some data, or maybe a video montage. I don't know. something with a lot of fair use in it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So, okay, so I've got a comment here from Mr. Radar saying that Fran recently posted a video showing her YouTube stats were literally 99.6% men. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Is the problem is not that the stats show that. The problem is that people take these stats at face value. Like when you watch a video on YouTube, has YouTube ever asked what your gender is? Like this is entirely based on the assumptions that they've already got in their database for the advertisers. And the assumptions, as far as I can tell, are mostly based on what other videos you watch. So there's this self-reinforcing feedback loop that if you mostly watch electronics videos, YouTube assumes you're a dude, and so it shows the electronics YouTubers that their audience is mostly dudes. So I don't know. I mean, I didn't even actually watch that video because I haven't been watching Friends videos lately, but maybe I should check it out because it would be useful to know like what what misconceptions are out there that people need to get cleared up. Because like if Fran is falling for that, like what gives? Like I thought she would know better. Yeah, like I think more people need to know that that data is completely bunk. So if I'm going to make a claim that that data is really bunk, it'd be nice to have something really strong to back that up with. So maybe there's some experiments I can run. Maybe I can find someone at Google to talk to. I don't know. See, and like this is where it would be good if I hadn't burned so many bridges, because I could go like, do I have any friends that work at Google? Do I? I don't know. Could I like have lunch with someone and be like, oh, by the way, how does that gender stat actually work? Would you be willing to share any of that? I don't think that works. I mean, when I have in the past had friends that worked at big companies like that, they never wanted to talk about work, and like, so I don't know, maybe doing an experiment would be the best way. Yeah, my free web says YouTube should have access to the Google profile gender. I mean, how many people fill that out, and how many people that watch your video actually have that set? Like, they've got to be extrapolating. I mean, I'd be really surprised if all of the data that you're seeing in that, dashboard app, whatever, actually comes from something that people have reported themselves. I don't think that's actually how advertising data works. Yeah, I mean, there's a handful of channels out there that are certainly not usually sexist, for sure. That definitely exists. But I mean, this is the thing, though. It's like, do I want to make another channel that just has some like tech stuff that looks shiny and people ooh and ah at it, and then post it on Reddit, and then we move on to the next shiny tech thing? Like, I feel like I've been doing that for like 15 years now, and I'm just sick of it. I'm tired of making shiny tech things that people will ooh and ah over on Reddit. Like, that's not the game I want to be playing anymore, but that seems to be the game that people want me to play. An audiophile. I certainly would not describe myself as an audiophile, but the speakers are nice. They're just Yamaha monitors. Oh. Hello. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of speculation about what's going on inside Google, but I mean, I don't think I can just speculate the problem away. I think I actually need to know how it works for sure, or I need to make some experimental measurements. Yeah, so how would you do that? I mean, you need to just make a bunch of fake Google accounts, which is probably against their terms of service, but, you know, research. Um, yeah, I mean, the other thing is I wonder if Google actually explains this stuff to... Because the thing that I think makes me the maddest about this is that the consumers of this data are people like Fran Blanche, who then like tell everyone else about it without ever noting where the data comes from. And it's like somebody in Google's position has a responsibility to tell the advertisers or the creators or whoever they're supplying this data to what the data methodology is. Otherwise, the data is worse than useless. It's basically just mechanized propaganda at that point. So, I mean, my suspicion is that the data is bad enough that they actually would rather advertisers don't find out how bad it is. So I don't actually know if this is going to be easy to dig through, but it's certainly interconnected with a lot of other big problems. Well, maybe this is a good time to open some actual mail. I was going to do that on the last stream, but was putting it off and then didn't actually get to it. I need to get something to drink though, so maybe I'll give you Tuco for just a sec. I'm back, and so are the loud fans in the server. Sorry about that. I picked the wrong day to do a ZFS pool scrub, I guess. Actually, yeah, I was a little nervous about the ZFS pool because I've got a neighbor here that seems to be, I think they're, like, maybe they're moving or something, but I think they're just, like, a weightlifter, and they drop weights on the floor a lot, and it's right next to where all the hard disks are, so I'm a little frustrated by that. Just looking at, so my free web says that regarding what people want, some people would also like video essays from a tech person. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I think, what we were talking about earlier. Like, I mean, if I was trying to make a video that was not just a, like, project show and tell, but was trying to get a particular point across, what point would I be trying to get across, and who is the audience? And I need to actually, like, figure out what's worthwhile there. And one problem I have there is that it's just really different from everything else I do. It's like pretty much all of the activities involved in producing, like, a video essay that's like, I don't know, here's how thing X is and how you should feel about it, or here's some, like, person and here's what they did, or whatever. You know, like, that's just very disconnected from everything else here. Like, I could do it, but there's really no overlap. Like, I mean, I guess I need to know how to edit video, and I need to, but I mean, a lot of those video edit essays don't even use, like, there's no photography. A lot of it's like stock footage. When there is photography, sometimes just like a talking head. And I don't even like eye contact. I don't like videos with talking heads. I don't like being a talking head. So I don't know. I could certainly try it. It's just I'm looking for a way to have some overlap between, like, the stuff I've been doing and that. So that's why I was trying to think about ways to have the next video have additional, like, narrative components to it that were maybe interesting, but still use the actual project build footage. Well, yeah, I guess I said I was going to open some stuff. Let's do that. Momentarily feeling super antisocial, but maybe I can get through that. Okay, let's start with this maybe. Okay, so I already opened this on stream. Just thought I might get some on this camera also. This lovely cat postcard was sent in by Dale Frey a little while ago. So yeah, this was the suggestion that that I could focus more on how to show how you would go about taking a project that you might have done on something like an Arduino, and then using more of a, like, low-level microcontroller, like in this case, like a PIC32 perhaps. So yeah, that's certainly something we can go into. And this kind of goes into, I mean, this is kind of one of the other types of videos that I could do more of, is here's a specific topic, here's how you actually get from point A to point B on that topic. I think for a video like that to be interesting, I'd probably want to do it in the context of a project. You know, maybe have um, like multiple storylines that I put together. So here's maybe something that explains why we're doing the project, something that explains like how the project is used, something that explains how it would be different from an Arduino, and then like something that goes into the actual steps of it. All right, so I've actually got a couple other things here from Dale also. So after we opened that, Dale sent in an email, and I was just gonna read like a little bit of this. Yeah, so Dale has a suggestion to stream for just 2 to 4 hours. Or sorry, my suggestion is to stream for 2 to 5 hours at a time, twice a week. I'd make it the same day every week unless something important comes up. Yeah, sorry, I'm just like reading ahead too much. I should just try to read this. So, yeah, so Micah, I just watched the last stream. My suggestion is to stream 2 to 5 hours at a time, twice a week. Same day each week unless something important comes up. In that case, make a short stream of about 1 or 2 minutes on YouTube only, explaining when you expect to be back on. Then erase that video just before starting the next stream. If you ask all of your viewers to tell their programmer friends to check out your live stream, you can get a lot more views. I would suggest starting each stream with a teardown of some device when you have one, and this will be interesting for people who find the present content overwhelming. After a while, they'll start listening to more and more of the programming content. Yeah, and I guess that's kind of assuming that the bulk of the stream is some kind of ongoing project work, like just doing some work in code or something, and then we would start it with some kind of interesting project that's more self-contained. So yeah, I can see where Dave's coming from, and like my first reaction to this is that, oh gosh, that's even more footage. Like the problem I'm having right now is that I feel behind on projects that I need to finish, and so starting a new project on every stream just seems like the opposite of what I need right now, but I do agree that would be interesting for people maybe. Maybe there's a way we can take a page from that. Yeah, and then Dave goes on to say that maybe I could have like a main business selling updated or selling like Wi-Fi routers with customized firmware. Yeah, so he's suggesting that maybe I could have like a little assembly line here modifying routers for people. Maybe, I mean, the problem I would have with most of these things is not that it's like, well, I could do that. Could I actually like do all the human interaction necessary? He's like talking about like hiring people to help me, and like, no, I'm pretty sure I shouldn't actually have employees. I think I would be terrible at that, or like. Yeah, I don't know what to do with that. I mean, he's basically telling me to just like get over my social anxiety and just like not be afraid of people, which is like cool story there. I mean, okay, yeah. And he says to give what you want to give and just work with the people who enjoy it. Write your book for the 20,000 people you want to impress rather than try to please everyone. I mean, I don't know who I'm doing this for right now. Like, nominally, I'm doing it for my patrons. I don't even really know who my patrons are. I don't really know who... Well, and then like, separately, the people I'm producing content for might not always be the same as the people who can afford to pay for the content. And so there's like the question of, well, like, who is currently backing me? I'm not really sure. Who am I making this for? I don't know. It's like, I feel like I'm here because a bunch of people saw my stuff on Reddit and thought it was cool. And now that I'm burned out on making cool stuff for Reddit, why am I actually here? And I mean, there are a lot of different answers to that. Like, who do I actually care about helping? I mean, I actually care about helping people who need help, who aren't always the people who are interested in technology. And people who are interested in technology might need help at a particular thing, and they might be doing just completely fine in most of their life. And do I want to focus on those people, or do I want to focus on trying to convey some actually useful skill to people who are struggling in some way that is meaningful to them in their life? I mean, I don't know how to do that. I feel like the things that I know how to do are more and more esoteric. Like, I don't really know how to make a good website these days. I feel like the way to make a good website keeps changing, and I just am so burned out on keeping up with that if you just wanted me to help out with your website for your small business or whatever, I could try that. I could just do the research. I don't think I'd be any better at it than just like any other person who knows how to read websites and follow directions. So, and I feel like the things that I feel more qualified to do than a lot of people might be the lower level stuff, but then that also feels more and more unnecessary now. It just feels like, well, if you want to actually understand how computers work, congratulations, your job now is to be depressed. That is the only thing you can do with that knowledge. Yeah, I think we got a couple more things from Dave. I don't know why I'm playing with this blue tack. It's probably full of lead. I really appreciate the patrons who say that they want to support me no matter what. I just also don't know how to actually use that. It's like if, yeah, I don't know. Like, I appreciate how much trust people put in me, but I also don't know how to use that as feedback on its own. And then I appreciate the feedback people give me, and I just still struggle to actually map it onto something that seems to me like it'll work. But let's continue. Oh, that's a good question. Becco wants to know how an astable multivibrator works. Yeah, I mean, you might have some luck at trying to build one in a circuit simulator. I forget what it's called, but there's this JavaScript, I think it's just called JS Circuit or something like that. There's this browser-based circuit simulator that shows you the current moving like with little arrows and stuff, and it's animated. And I find that trying to follow a multivibrator drawn in that program is actually pretty fun and illustrative. Yeah, the we support whatever you do is kind of like do what makes you happy, and I appreciate them both, but I don't actually find them useful currently. Okay, so I have 2 more packages from Dale, the same person who sent the postcard. I'm trying to figure out which one of these came in first. I think the small one came in first. Oh gosh, I need to turn down the bit rate. We do not need 100 megabit 4K of this right now. Alright. I usually open these on camera, but not directly on the live stream, just in case there's personal information I need to redact. Oh, I thought I could open this all in one go. I need a real letter opener. I don't know, a screwdriver works pretty well. Oh. Okay, I think this is safe. So I got a book recommendation, it looks like. Opening up by writing it down. Yeah, I might try that. Been listening to a bunch of audiobooks lately, and I don't know. It's been a while since I had a consistent like journaling practice. That certainly helped me get through some stuff in the past. And then we have a horse card. Oh, there's another $1 or another $20 bill. Wow, thank you. Cash donation. And a horse. It's the supporter of the equine advocates. Because we like horses. It's a good horse. This horse is going to hang out on my fridge. I'm trying to catch up on the chat here. James says one thing they'd like to see is more kind of technique videos, like here's how you do X with Y, or here's how you'd solve problem Z. Doing X with a Y is pretty easy. You cut off the vertical bit and then put another one inverted under the first. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I've done Twitter polls. I mean, part of the problem with that is like, I don't necessarily think it would help to be asking people which projects to start next. I feel like I have too many projects. Like I'm under a mountain of incomplete projects, And so the advice I need isn't so much how do I start a new project, but how do I finish some of these and have a better process for putting out work that people find useful in some way. And maybe the first step is I throw away everything I have. I don't actually think that's the answer. Like when I've put out polls, often there are a couple of things I could work on. They all seem good. I'd like a tiebreaker from the audience. But I don't know how, I think in that case, there are just actually a couple of things that are basically just both ready to work on, and I need some information about what people would find most interesting. But if I were to do that every day, I would get no progress done. I would just end up starting a new project on every stream, and we would never finish anything, and I would never release an edited video, and only those of you who can hang out for like 8 hours at a time would actually see any of this. So I think I have one more thing from Dale to open. So let's see what else Dale sent me. He's been giving my P.O. box a workout. So this has instructions to open it at the top. Yeah, I mean, I could totally start new projects under more like crowd guidance. It's just like that's already kind of what I'm doing with the P.O. box, right? Like people just send me stuff and like, oh, that's a new project because people wanted to send it to me. Like I could ask for more of that, but I feel like I also already have a lot of it in my life, and like guidance on how to finish projects in a way that is not completely boring for everyone. Like that's what I'm trying to find for myself. I don't know if I can really get it from just asking for it directly like that. Huh. That's interesting. James says, I think it'd be helpful for you to make a list of styles of video you can make with that USB switcher project and make them all. Like make a time-lapse pretty video of you doing the CAD, and a technique video of reverse engineering, and a rant to the camera about what's right and wrong. That's interesting. Just make them all as separate videos. I mean, one thing is I am actually overly precious with the process of releasing a video right now, because I feel like if I release the wrong thing, it'll just mean that all the people that subscribe to my YouTube channel are going to unsubscribe, and if I release a bunch of junk to my patrons, I'm just going to be spamming them, and so it actually helped a little bit to just make a completely separate channel for some new project recently, when I did this long video from the Isopods. But I don't know, I mean, I could also just release all those on the main channel and just like let the dice roll. Yeah, evaluate each moment, which small work chunk to address, and then just do that. I have trouble with that. I mean, that's worked for me occasionally. There are some times when I've had several physical projects going in the shop, and I can just kind of wander around between them and work on them all, and that's been good. I've been having more trouble with that lately. Part of it is just there are too many distractions. Part of it is that I don't even have the motivation to work on any of the projects a lot of the time, and so I just find myself like depressed and in a heap on the floor because I can't actually make any progress. Some of that might just be I need new medication, but we'll see. I think some of it is just like brain weasels, but some of it is actually just I need to find a concrete source of motivation to do this stuff. And I don't know, I'm still kind of stuck on the idea that there needs to be like a narrative, and like part of me likes the idea of doing a bunch of separate kinds of video, but I'm also worried that that might be just making the problem of spreading myself too thin even worse. But that does kind of dovetail with the idea that I've had to have maybe multiple concurrent storylines that I weave together into the next video. And so there could be Like all those different kinds of videos you mentioned could just be different parallel aspects of this next video. Doing that is risky in the sense that if people only want one of those kinds of things, like, I didn't come here for, like, you know, people with weird foam puppets. I just came here for, like, you know, time-lapsed metal flying around the room. Like, you know, those kinds of things. Like, oh well, that's life. But if I can come up with a formula that actually is compelling for an entire audience, and this kind of goes back to, like, well, what do I actually want a YouTube channel to be for? I basically haven't known, which is why it's just been named after my handle this whole time. And maybe I come up with a specific theme and make a separate channel for that specific theme, or maybe I just try to transition this channel into something new. I don't know. James has not unsubscribed from a channel based on one bad video. Well, that makes one of us. Yeah, well, maybe let's open this up. That's relatable. Blitzity DIY says that their instinct with polls is to immediately do the opposite of the winning result. Yeah, and then they're personally very into making lists and writing things out by approaching tasks in tiny chunks. Yeah, I should do more of that too. I mean, I think sometimes it's hard to divide this stuff into small chunks because I don't really know where I'm going. It's like, if my job was to build a specific thing, I could do that, but my job apparently is to do whatever I want, which doesn't actually tell me what to do because I don't want anything and I don't actually know what is useful, so it is an underspecified problem apparently, and I need to just figure out how to come up with a temporary goal at least. Oh good, I wasn't recording that entire rant on the camera. Let's open this maybe. I don't think I cut through enough. This knife actually is not as sharp as I thought it was. It certainly isn't as sharp now. Oh, we have a book. Aw, it's a cat book. Aw, a character of cats. The origins, intelligence, behavior, and stratagems of Felis sylvestris catus. Aw. Well, that's cool. Okay, I could use some reading about cats. Thank you. Oh, and it comes with a note. So, I found this book to be an interesting read. Among other things, it explains how cats learn to solve problems, which is a different process than we humans use. I suggest giving the book to a friend or to the used bookstore at a local library when you're done with it. We try to read about a book a week and then give it away in addition to our regular library books. Oh, that's cool. Well, that's very thoughtful of you, Dave. Thank you. And yeah, there are a couple of other cat people around here that might enjoy this, I can imagine. Well, thank you. Oh, aw. The book was intended for my cat. Yeah, probably. I think I'll have to see if Tuco can read this. Vocalizations. Oh, field of view. There are no search and rescue cats. I'm disappointed. There are no seeing eye cats. Well, at least we know the cats aren't going to be in the back of that police car. Well, this is great. I'm not going to read this on the stream, but I will enjoy reading this later. Thank you. Let's see if that was everything. Yeah. I have to keep that packaging away from my cat. James is wondering if they missed a birthday. When is Tuco's birthday? think I've been assuming Tuco's birthday is in like August, but let me check. I don't think so though. When does my calendar say I've been celebrating Tuco's birthday? Oh yeah, August 5th. That was when I adopted him. So I adopted Tuco August 5th, 2014, and he was about a year old then. Oh, we want to know about Cat's field of view. Let's find out. It was on page 123. Oh no, there's a diagram of a cat falling out of a tree. Talking about the air riding reflex. Oh gosh, cat. I know, but you're about to land, and then you're like, oh yeah, I got this. Oh, there's the cat's hearing range. Oh, so cats don't hear bass. Oh, and there's all the Tuco meows right there in the... My ear is super sensitive. Whoa, cat. You can just see all sorts of things. Not quite as many things as the dog. It's cool though. All right. What's next? Oh yeah, I think I maybe had one other email. Let's see, I was not going to read this whole thing, but not like I haven't read it, but just I'm not going to read it all to you. Yeah, this one has some suggestions. So this is from Ryan, and this email is mostly about the Siftio cubes. So thank you for doing the Siftio streams. They found them interesting. And then they have a set of the V2 cubes, and they've got some questions about compiling. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to answer like build questions. So this is like help on getting the Siftio cubes to compile. I'd probably just have to try it myself and like debug it. I think most of these questions are kind of hard to answer without just trying it out, because it's like oh, my cat meowed at me. Well, that depends on context. I can't tell you why your cat meowed at you. And I don't think this actually indicates what the error was. But then the motivation here is they want to build a fun game and learn some new things, and integrate it with homebrew board games, which seems pretty cool. We want to create a simple die roller and see how the interfaces can be manipulated in different ways. Yeah, that's one thing that I think we were pretty interested in at Siftio too, was trying to figure out like how could you interact in the game with the external world. And you know, there were some pie in the sky ideas we had, but nothing really practical that we found. It would have been cool to have like a little kind of dock that would have additional communication through the neighbor sensors or through the radio. Oh, a question about the nail polish. It looks actually green and purple depending on the angle. This was a gift from, actually this was a Christmas present. I think it was Christmas, from a friend, from Charity. And yeah, I'm a little out of focus here. Can we focus? Focus. Usually you can tap to focus, but oh, I think I might just be too close. Just like not realizing how close I was to the lens. This is also a bit of a problem with my camera mounting. I need to get this darn orb taken apart. I still haven't done quite all the photography I want, so it's still set up, taking up a bunch of space over there. Oh gosh, is this still on? Why isn't this focusing? Is this on manual? Why is autofocus off? I don't know why autofocus was off. That's interesting. Oh no, autofocus is on. Face detect autofocus is off. That's fine. So yeah, I've still got this set up because I need to take a few more videos of it. I keep needing to do video of that at night, and I keep being tired at night when it's actually dark. Yeah, it was not very servo AF. Usually this is much better at that. I think I keep forgetting that the minimum distance on this lens is actually pretty far. Yeah, it's a little beat up, the nail job, but the color's cool. And yeah, that is a new Opsis board. I was trying to get the firmware installed on it and having trouble with that the other day. We could do some more work on that. Oh yeah, and then the next part about this would be that they wanted some maybe additional talk about what it was like to actually work at Siftio. So yeah, actually there's a whole section here with ideas for possible streams about the Siftio cubes. And then here I am wondering, like, oh, just streams or edited videos or both? How am I going to divide these? But it seems like maybe if Ryan is asking specifically for streams, they want to stream. Would other people want an edited video? I don't know, maybe both. And then how long do I spend actually doing the editing? Anyway, so one idea that Ryan presents would be they would love to see a topic on building a game for the Siftio cubes. So we could like decide as a group maybe like what to build, and then like we could build it. And they suggest a simple variation of poker where everyone's dealt a cube that has 2 cards where you can tilt it to see or hide them. And then you have 3 cubes be the flop, and then another the turn, and last the river. I don't know how poker works, but I'm going to assume those are game objects. I don't know. I can learn how poker works. I have a friend who knows how poker works. I could ask them. And then they were curious to see curious to have some stories of life at the startup there. What was it like to interact with the small team? And they caught that I said it was stressful, but what was the timeline? Was it the timeline that made it stressful? What was fun about it? The gold cube set was pretty sweet, and them still taking me on the trip seemed pretty neat as well. Yeah, that was nice of them, and it was nice to go to Seattle and see CES. It was pretty weird. And then Ryan continues, possibly to look at what exists today with the existing hardware and what I would change software-wise now, if anything. Yeah, so you mean like with the chips that now exist on the market, how would I redo the design? Yeah, we talked about that just a little bit, and you know, it would be interesting to know like how would, say, the ESP32 stack up against what we did. Like what would it look like if you just put an SPI screen in there and an ESP32? My hunch is that you would still end up having some battery, like some power usage problems, but it would be interesting to see how far that gets you. And then, yeah, how large of a change would it be? Probably pretty big. I mean, one downside of building something so close to the hardware's capabilities is that it ends up being pretty specific to that hardware. But yeah, no, that was a great set of suggestions and questions. Let's see. I mean, we could do a separate stream maybe with, as Ryan was suggesting, building a game for the Siftio cubes, if that would be interesting. Life at the startup there was kind of weird. I mean, I don't know if that would make an entire stream, but I mean, I could maybe talk about that just a little bit. I mean, most of the way that I operate is I find a thing that I can do largely by myself, and then I do it. So, most of my jobs I've been trying to just like find a big thing that I can design and write without having to do as much interaction, just because I find that a lot harder. And at this startup, I mean, it was a little bit small, right? It was, I mean, the whole company was like 20 people, but it felt really small because the actual team sizes that we had to work on any particular thing were just like a couple of people. So there were a couple of games that we were writing at any given time, and the game was usually a couple of people. We had one full-time artist on staff who worked with several of the games, and then we had some teams of developers and game designers working together. The part of the company I worked at was slightly separate in that we were pretty preoccupied with the platform rather than the individual games. But then even that subdivides so much. It's like, well, there's one person working on like server-side stuff for the game store and client-side stuff for that, and then there's one person doing like electrical engineering. The software was pretty small. It was mostly just me working with one other engineer on the software, Liam, and he and I would usually end up just picking somewhat separate problems so that we could just work full speed without getting in each other's way. So, like, for a while he was working on USB and I was working on like graphics firmware, and then I spent some time like designing an emulator for the virtual machine, and then he spent some time working on like low-level implementation on the VM, and I spent some time working on the compiler, and it was all just like pretty separate. So like, most days I come into work and it didn't make a ton of sense to even like go to a physical office for a lot of that, but I was going to a physical office for a lot of that job. I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I would bike like halfway across the city from my apartment to the dog patch, which is this area of the city that's kind of along the east edge next to the shipping, but a little further in, so it's like more like warehousey kind of space. And it used to be more just completely industrial, and now it's kind of gentrified to the point where it's more like startup offices and the occasional fancy restaurant. And so that was like all right for a while. Like I had coworkers I liked. We would go to lunch and talk, and I would go to the same bagel shop every morning. The more stressful it got, though, the harder it was to just go to the office every day. And after a while, I started working from home, which was nice in some ways. I missed interacting with people, but then like a lot of the interactions they felt kind of counterproductive anyway. Like I needed to concentrate. So I don't know. That was the last time I worked like full-time on site in an office with a bunch of other, not even a bunch of other engineers, like a bunch of other like people working at a company. Several of them were engineers, but we were a team with a bunch of different kinds of skills and people. Yeah, but I mean, part of why I was doing that at that particular time is I knew that that's what I wanted. Like, I knew that I could just dig super deep into a task and not look at the outside world and just run with it. And that's exactly what I wanted to do at that point, because I had planned to take that job at the same time as I was going to be recovering from surgery. So the way I planned it, I was going to work for Siftio for some months and then take some time off for surgery and then work for them for some more months while I recovered, and just kind of take that however long it would go. And so in some ways it was actually pretty nice, because it was a great distraction. Like, I probably worked harder than I should have some weeks, but in general it was just a really good distraction from both the anxiety leading up to surgery and some of the recovery afterwards. But concretely, it was actually just me really avoiding the rest of the world as much as I could, like working on a really complicated technical problem that I could do as much on my own as possible. And, I was successful at that, I think, but it's not necessarily a goal I would choose again. It was a goal that suited that particular time period. And I mean, as far as like what else you'd change about something like Siftio now, I mean, I still don't know if that is an idea that's ready. Like, the problem that I think we run into is that it's an idea that looks really good if you don't consider how much it costs, and then the minute people talk about how much it costs, it's a problem, because there's no sweet spot. Like, either it's a really expensive project because it's like 3 tiny iPads, or it's a really inexpensive project, and then people are going to be disappointed by the performance. Like, I don't know that there's a good sweet spot where it can be inexpensive enough to sell and still performant enough to meet people's expectations right now. I mean, I think even though we really tried to get as much performance out of like the graphics and sound as we could, but it's still really limited by just how much money we could put into each individual unit that we were selling. And then the connectivity, I think, was a big disappointment. A lot of people just figured, like, oh, it should have Wi-Fi, it should connect to the internet, but like, we didn't have the power or the money for that. And if you were to do that nowadays, it's cheaper. It still costs a lot of power, in which case you need larger batteries, which is expensive, or it just doesn't last as long, which is disappointing. So you've got the same problems. I think you can get, you can certainly get some system on chips now that would just be much better choices than what we had available at the time. But I don't know if the fundamental economics of power and screens and materials has really changed enough. Oh, yeah. Yeah, recovery is a long process. I traveled for surgery and I took a month off. No, because I was traveling for a month and I took, I think, a total of 2 months off from work. So pretty serious. Like, I planned that entire job around that trip. Like, I had already planned that surgery trip since before getting the job at Siftio, and while I was interviewing for that job, I was looking for something that would allow me to take a decent chunk of leave like that. But by that time I was physically fine. It's like you're over the soreness. It's more just the gradual process of being able to just exert yourself as much as you're used to, I think. And that didn't take long. It wasn't that long until I was overexerting myself at work again, which I shouldn't have been. But yeah, at least the particular trip I took, I had a total of like a month of recovery, most of which was before I had to travel back, which was good. Tuco is so peaceful, right over there. Anyway, my list here has mail, actual mail, email, feels. I think we've got plenty of feels. We could have more if we need to, but I think we're full up on feels. The like co-working thing I was thinking about mostly tackling related to OpenCV and video encoding. So maybe we can head over to that, assuming I'm actually going to have to look at what I put in the stream title occasionally to make sure I'm not forgetting entire huge topics that I promised people earlier. But yeah, we did actually open the mail. I think we just need some co-working. Oh, sorry I've been neglecting the Twitch chat. I had that behind another window for a bit. Oh yeah, sorry about losing the questions earlier. There's a question, I don't know if it's a question actually, Grave Gatekeeper on Twitch says that there's 2 things you can do to increase your robot battery. You can use lithium-ion battery to make it last longer, or a power bank. I'm really lost as to the context, but yeah, also lithium-ion batteries are usually what you'd find inside a power bank. I don't know what kind of robot you're talking about, though. A lot of robots you'd need to draw more current than power banks could safely deliver. Depends on your power bank, of course. Like, there are fancy power banks now that are designed for laptops, but a lot of power banks only really want to give you like 10 watts, whereas robots often need to run higher loads than that. Oh gosh. James suggests that it'd be interesting to do a video on how cheap you could make a device with the same sort of specs now, and then how much you could push the specs for the same price. Really? My inclination about that is like, wait, haven't we been there? Like, I did that. We did that in like 2012, and mostly nobody cared. Why would they care again if I did it again? I think that's a lot of what I have trouble with now with motivation. It's like I feel like I've done all of these projects in the past that I've put so much work into, and mostly nobody cared at all. So why should I do anything else? So I don't know. All right, this is 30 days of power. I think this whole chunk here is mostly processing Isopod video. Right. Yeah, so I was having trouble getting anything done editing, but then I had an alright time making this after I got the music picked out. But there's no story here, really. There's like sort of a story. There's like my cat went upstairs and ran, and then he came downstairs and went outside. Like that's basically the story. But there's more story here than exists in a lot of the videos I make. Oh, no. So James, I didn't mean that I already made like a YouTube video about that, but I mean like I did that as my job for years, and like why would I just do that again? I don't know. Like it. Gosh, that wheel bounces so much when he runs on it. I keep running into this problem where I find myself doing the things that are high effort and low utility, low reward. Michael's amused that Tuco put so much effort into the wheel. Oh, well, he really likes it. He likes being able to go fast. Like, he likes running down the hallway too, but there's something about the wheel that he finds fun. Oh, Andy's wondering if Tuco is chasing something on that wheel. He looks upwards at something. Usually that's my hands. Usually when he's looking at something, that's me just like moving my fingers, or I'm pushing the wheel forward. Because he'll run on it on its own, but he seems to have the most fun when he's pushing it and I'm pushing it and we're doing it together. Like that seems to be his goal. But yeah, I did this thing, which I've been wanting to do several of these, just like one per month with the raw footage, and I've got the video processed for February. I just need to do the audio. I was trying to do that using something similar to the MaxMSP patch that I used for January, and then I ran into this problem where MaxMSP crashes after the file reaches 2 gigabytes. Yeah, at first it's kind of fast. Later on it's a little more relaxed of a drone. So, I mean, there's a lot of approaches that I could take to putting audio to one of these long Isopod compilation videos. I could just not. I could have them be silent. I thought that was boring. I could have it be like a music mix. I don't personally have like 8 hours of fresh music that I could put on each of these that is like mine or from someone who that I know of would let me do that. I could try to like curate like free music, but it seemed better to just do something generative that would actually correspond with the video and that I could just kind of make into this like relaxing soundscape maybe. So the way I was doing that was with MaxMSP. I had that open somewhere. Why is this covering my taskbar? Why do these windows sometimes cover the taskbar? It doesn't seem like they usually do. Anyway. So the one I made for January is a little bit like this. This is the next video that I'm trying to process. So this is again an entire month of Isopod footage. So it starts out, we just flipped from January to February, and then February 28th, and then March 1st. And so all of this is not sped up uniformly at all, but it is run through this time compression program, which kind of speeds up any individual frames that don't have at least a certain amount of motion in them. Cute little ones on the right side. I don't know if that tiniest one was a mite or a tiny springtail. Oh, I guess that would have been a mite, because this is from before I added the springtails. So yeah, it's not extremely sped up, right? Like you can look at the clock in the corner, and like right now it's going a little faster, but a lot of the sections it's close to regular 1x speed. But it completely skips over anything that has no motion. If it has very little motion, it'll get sped up more. The actual relationship between the like how sensitive it is to motion and how sensitive it is to size is based on how it's taking this entire 2D image of optical flow vectors and aggregating them into a single number. James suggests to drive the video edits from some audio. Yeah, I mean, you could do that, but like, where am I going to be producing a new 8-hour piece of music every month for this also, or where do I get that from? Like, that's the problem I would run into. So anyway, I've had this program just running on my main editing machine for a while, just chewing up power. And so I finally got it to a good stopping point where it's finished all of February. It finished at least a big chunk of April. April? Yeah. Just because I think I wanted to run that file for some reason. So I finally have a lull in processing. And in fact, I was going to process one more file, just getting further into March, but pretty soon it just crashes. Like, these are both me trying to process the same file. It runs for like an hour or two, and then actually it doesn't even take that long. I think it crashed even sooner. And I get this unspecified launch failure for a CUDA kernel. It's like, I wonder what that's actually talking about. Well, if you're talking about compressing the Isopod footage into something significantly shorter, we could do that, but that's a very different experience. I kind of like to have the long several-hour videos because they feel like you can just like put one on and have an ambient experience. But like here, that is with an additional 64x speed up. Like, these videos are useful for me to just see what the overall video is doing a bit more, but I don't know, like for January I did include a really fast time lapse at the very beginning, and then I included the less compressed footage. I could do something like that for each month. And this is 4096x. I'm like, this is interesting, but you can't see the bugs at all, and it's really short. So yeah, I guess the point I'm at right now, I've kind of hit the limits of my current techniques. Because this tool is crashing on March, and my max MSP sketch is crashing when it reaches 2 gigabytes. So I was trying to run February through this sketch, and it kind of works, but crashes at 2 gigs. pretty boomy bass at this point. Really low and intense. So there's a bunch of stuff to tweak here. I'm still torn about the Max MSP stuff, because in some ways it's just really convenient. It's nice to just be able to rewire stuff and poke at stuff, but I mean, the main problem I'm having with this is the I/O. So I don't know if there's a non-real-time way to process video into audio. I think you can do non-real-time processing of audio by itself, but right now we're kind of crossing between two different real-time domains, and I don't think there's a way to do that, especially reproducibly, so we're a little bit at the whim of the scheduler right now. And then this problem where I can't seem to output more than 2 gigabytes with Max seems to be maybe the final nail in the coffin for that. So the way this works right now is it's taking this video file that's already processed by the video summary tool, and it's playing this video back in real time. The video frames show up on this monitor here. Then we're doing optical flow on those video frames, some video feedback, that's ending up here. This image that you're seeing here, which has been a little bit processed, that's what we're sampling from down here using these two-dimensional oscillators, and that's what converts the two-dimensional data here into one-dimensional audio data. So as the Isopod's moving around, the different color, or the different like sizes and textures end up creating somewhat different audio textures, but like a lot of what you're hearing is the actual video turning into a waveform. So for example, if you have stripes on the Isopod, or if you have multiple Isopods, or if you have the Isopod oriented a certain way, that'll change the harmonic content relative to the fundamental frequencies that we're setting over here in the oscillators. So it's kind of interesting. It's a little bit weird and indirect, but it seemed like something I wanted to try, just using the video directly as audio. It's weird because like technically it's more direct, but like the result seems more indirect. It's also using the position of the centroid on this image as some filter cutoff frequencies. So that's what changes these two filters. But yeah, it was just something I was trying. I think I want to change approaches though, and I was thinking of maybe doing something like this for February and then changing approaches in March, but given that I can't seem to output more than 2 gigabytes, I think I'm going to have to change approaches for February, unless I want to chop the input file into smaller pieces, which doesn't seem fun. So this processing up here is very similar to what the video summary tool is already doing. It's internally got an image that looks a lot like this. So if I had some way for that tool to save audio in addition to video, I could have it save, say, a multi-channel, like 8-channel uncompressed audio stream synchronized with the video, preferably even in the same file, and then I could use that as input for whatever other tools I want. Like I could use Max to take that same file and transform it somehow. I could use any other audio workstation like Ableton. I could use plugins in Ableton. So I think that's the route to try approaching this through. I've had several problems with the output side of this tool with OpenCV. Unrelated to the crash here and unrelated to the NADA numbers. Those are also two separate bugs we need to deal with. But I've had a problem with the output for this. The H.264 codec. The H.264 codec uses OpenH.264, which is not what I'm used to. Usually I'm using libavcodec. OpenH.264 seems to be a somewhat less popular library that Cisco open sourced a while ago for video conferencing, and I was having trouble with it generating some video that is not entirely correct. Like it's very close to entirely correct, but with a couple of small errors in it. That's not the biggest problem. I can work around that. The biggest problem really is this crash, but I think just for various reasons I want to take the output code and like rip out the OpenCV wrapper thing that's in there right now and just use libavcodec directly. So then I'll be able to write audio in addition to video. I'll be able to change the video codec. I could use libx264. I could use for just a sec, I couldn't actually tell whether that noise was coming from outside or from the synthesizer. Yeah. I mean, the other problem I've been having with the output, besides OpenX264 being a little bit weird and not having, and the fact that we don't have audio support, the other problem is that it's not giving me control over when the keyframes are generated. So I can't generate keyframes like every couple of seconds. Instead, it gives me a file without any keyframes except for at the very beginning. So I have to use proxy footage to edit the videos, and that slows everything down. So, I don't know. I mean, I could still imagine working around this problem and not switching to libavcodec, but I think I'll enjoy switching to libavcodec. Well, maybe the first thing to debug here is the not a number, since that's really the first failure we're seeing. But the not a number and this crash, and then the output just generally sucking are all separate problems to deal with. The record. I could make some separate plugin for Max MSP just to do long recordings with it. I don't think that's what I want though. Max DSP to GNU Radio compiler. How does GNU Radio solve this problem? Like, Max MSP and GNU Radio seem superficially a tiny bit similar. Is there actually a converter? Are any of the objects similar? What? Didn't I have... I forget if I was doing this in 2015 or 2017. I think I was doing this in 2017. There we go. Yeah, I guess I was using 15. I forget whether I was using... The actual version of Visual Studio I was picking, I think, depended on what OpenCV and CUDA were both happy with. I suspect they're both fine with 2017, but I don't really want to switch versions right now. I just want to go back to what I was doing before. I'm also tempted to recompile OpenCV because I built it with only support for the current GPU that's in this machine. So I've got these binaries now that don't run on my other computer, which is a little annoying. Uses a different GPU microarchitecture. So anyway, I don't think I need this. Oh, do I not actually have all of Visual Studio 2015 installed? Maybe I was just using it without being signed in before. Oh well. Guess I'll fuss with my login. Didn't really want to do that. Yeah, why is someone mistaking the Google chat for a search engine? I don't understand. Can I pretend to be Firefox today? Thanks, Microsoft, for updating my license to this free-to-use product. Yeah, I think I installed it on here and just never actually signed in, so it deactivated itself after 30 days. This is the other problem I have constantly, is just everything about the current state of technology just depresses me so much. Like, computers just seem like a bad idea, and this doesn't seem to be changing. Yeah, Firefox would be a good video game character. Is that like Tails? Oh, that's funny. Did we already happen to have a breakpoint at GPU mat create? I guess the failure was at GPU mat download. I'm guessing this would happen if the GPU is out of memory, but I've had this even on files that shouldn't be too large, even right after rebooting the machine. symbols right away. I don't think it's even trying to break from the debugger yet, it's just doing that early. Anyway, I need a brief break. I'll be right back. It's acting like it's just not picking up the command line arguments. This is not what we put in before. Oh no. Therapist auditions. I mean, video meetings with therapists are certainly a thing. Don't get argv or argc. Gosh, if debugging computers wasn't already annoying enough, debugging computers in this... Like, why is it not apparently giving me the command line arguments I want, nor the breakpoints? Does it not seem to even be reaching this line? No, that's got the arguments. This might just be what I get for debugging a release build. I also don't really know how to use Visual Studio, so I kind of feel like I'm feeling around every time I'm in this program. That breakpoint should have hit. I think maybe there's something going on where there are multiple versions of this actual function in the binary, because it's closure. Might have gotten... There may be like a... Like, might be multiple addresses corresponding with that line. I don't know. Let's try a debug build. I just didn't actually want to change the build type because I wanted to reproduce the problem first. Anyway, that might just mean I've got a typo in my command line arguments. Is that actually the right path? Maybe not. Oh, I forgot the underbar one. That would do it. It's like several kinds of fail. I wasn't seeing this enter that that lambda function for some debugger related reason, and then I wasn't seeing the message because I guess the messages don't show up in the output box. That's what I wanted. Okay, can we just run this and reproduce the problem now? I don't know if we have a separate output window or if it's just not showing up down here. Exception. That looks like the right kind of place for this to fail, but I'm not seeing any of the other output. Like, these messages should be showing up somewhere. But then this was failing inside of a GPU map download somewhere. And this seems to be as we're trying to download the foreground count buffer. That could mean pretty much anything. Well, if it is a GPU side error, I don't think it'll change it by switching to a debug build. So we could try a debug build. That probably won't change the behavior. We could verify that. One thing that might narrow it down is if we can synchronously run all the GPU stuff so that any errors happen immediately. CUDA launch blocking. It really frustrates me when stuff like this doesn't take you to the actual documentation. It's like, here's a bunch of people talking about this thing. Can you just show us where it's actually documented, please? None of these are actual documentation. I miss when people had actual documentation for stuff, when technology wasn't just an endless series of searching for other people's answers to other people's questions. It's not good. It's just a bunch of junk that's hard to wade through and doesn't actually lead you to a complete understanding of anything. And it's like, oh great, I got it. There's this environment variable. If I set it, it'll probably work. What I actually wanted was some documentation that had this and everything else that would have been nearby. Like, I don't actually just want this one thing. I want the whole discussion on that topic. This isn't documentation either. This is somebody's presentation. This is also somebody's presentation. Yeah, oh gosh, I hate computers. What was that other thing? CUDA memcheck. CUDA design guide. so sad about the state of everything. Like, I think it used to be more part of the, I don't know, like the culture of making software that you make like a user's manual and like a reference guide and stuff like that. And I think at some point the importance of like a single piece of documentation just seemed to get eroded. Like maybe the same mechanism that eroded the need for just a single like floppy disk or CD that the software comes on. Like software is no longer a physical artifact, so we lost track of the manual. It's already in my path even. That's not even the version of the binary from the build directory. That's just a copy I made earlier, but it should be the same. So it doesn't crash right away. It runs for a little while. So if I can just run this under CUDA memcheck, that would be really nice, maybe. I don't know, it's just going to automatically run a lot slower, probably. Yeah. It's an interesting theory about the feedback loop where people assume the documentation's bad, so they don't work on the documentation, they don't look for documentation. Maybe. I mean, some projects still have good documentation. I guess two that come to mind are like Python and maybe Blender. And then you still search for something in those programs and you don't get the documentation. You get some random Stack Overflow thread where somebody half understood the answer in response to somebody else's badly formed question. And it's just like this is the entire thing that we live in now. Like no one actually knows what they're doing. We just have a bunch of stuff that kind of works that we plug into a big database, and it's not very satisfying to live in that environment. It's interesting. Was that a GPU reset? It seems like the kind of thing it would have done for into memory. That grid transform is where we resize images, but like that, this could mean so many things. I'm still guessing it's kind of an out-of-memory shaped error, but who knows? Speaking of documentation, I don't even know if libavcodec has a manual. So I think it just has source code mostly. I don't think this has much. Yeah, this hardly has anything in it. This is just like tells you which libraries do what. Did I download ffmpeg source? Computer's gonna be dragging now. Oh, did we just crash the GPU again? So the other failure was a download on the result from the foreground mask algorithm. And this is just something else that happened like along the way. This actually, this is really different. This isn't even in the foreground background segmentation. This is after the optical flow from calculating magnitudes, I think. And this seems to be a CUDA API error, but we told CUDA memcheck to tell us about all the API errors. So, Oh, we could force blocking launches here, which might help. Computer is not completely stuck, but it's a little slow. Very slightly stuck. I think I downloaded the ffmpeg repo. Is that true? I feel like I've compiled ffmpeg on all of my computers at this point. Maybe that's not actually true. Can't highlight text because computer is too stuck. Oh, did the GPU just run out of memory right there? Is that what happened? Definitely get more info. Is this because I asked for more info, or is this because of the synchronous launches and I get the error right away? Unspecified launch failure on CUDA API call to CUDA memcopy 2D async. In what cases will CUDA give me an unspecified launch failure? I don't want, oh my god, I never want Stack Overflow answers. Tell me, like, at least maybe the NVIDIA forums, but preferably the NVIDIA documentation. Does anyone remember MSDN and, like, the Win32 API? Like you could just type the name of a function and you get documentation on it. You don't get, like, Stack Overflow, you get, like, the documentation. Like, this is the manual that defines how this function works. And I miss that, just being able to search for something and get its definition. This seems similar. See, and then, like, there's no job for humans here anymore. Like, it is impossible to actually know any of this stuff. We just have to play the same dumb pattern matching machine that the search engine is doing. And so inevitably the search engine is going to be better at it than we are, because there's nothing to be good at other than pattern matching. I'd suggest updating CUDA. I'm pretty sure I'm running the latest already, but internal, yeah, gosh, and this was 2016. And then, like, the only way to actually find out what's actually going on inside this stuff is to, like, reverse engineer it. But then you don't do that unless you have tons of time. And then once you've done it, you've got this, like, secret knowledge, which you can use to find vulnerabilities. So no one shares it. Oh, there's the neighbors dropping weights again. Oh, that's interesting. Somebody suggests that rebooting fixes it? I love how people who ask questions on Stack Overflow sometimes just invent acronyms. It's like, this is now called a ULF. It's not just an unspecified launch failure. Like, who knows if that exists inside of any of the, like, inside of anything except this one person's head. Of course people are hitting this trying to mine Bitcoin. Ugh. This person says they've seen unspecified launch failure when accessing memory past the end of an array. That's pretty generic. I could try rebooting again, but I've tried that, not like today, but when I first hit this problem. I mean, we could try a different input file, see if that changes the results at all. Yeah, I don't know. What do you do when your neighbor is doing something that just seems like really obviously like they should stop, but you don't want to confront them about it? Uh, skip ahead to 15 and see if we have any problems with that. I mean, that doesn't really tell us anything though. If this just takes, like, will this just take longer before it fails? Probably. Yeah, I mean, I'm aware that you get a better experience if you know what documentation to look for, but like, the thing I'm complaining about is I feel like I've gone to a reference library because I don't know, and I've gone to the card catalog because I don't actually know what book has the thing I want. I'm at the card catalog looking up my search term, and then instead of actually telling me what book has that search term, instead somebody like spray painted a slightly correct answer on the card. It's like I didn't actually want the graffiti on the card catalog. I actually wanted the book. And I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like if you were to do a web search in like the early 2000s, you'd be much more likely to get the actual documentation. Hmm. That's a better error. Maybe we can work with this. Illegal memory access. I don't know if that narrows it down between system memory and GPU memory at this point, but maybe now CUDA memcheck will give us some more info. So what was that? 315.17? Let's just run this. Oh, 315.17. This must be a short file. Because 315.23 is just right there. Stack Overflow? More like Snack Overflow, says Mr. Radar. Yeah. That could be good though. I mean, snacks are nice. I got some of these bonito fish flakes for my cat a while ago, and I gave him a couple, and he seemed to be pretty into them. But then I didn't give it to him for a long time because I was worried that they might be too salty. And then I had the chance to ask my vet last time I had to go in there, and she's like, oh yeah, it's okay to give him a couple. This is just going to take some amount of time to crash. Oh, is this the crash? Yeah, that's pretty good. It's like the GPU crashes, and then the app is like, oh shit, what happened? That seemed like a sequence of problems that eventually led to the crash. Oh, where's the beginning? That looks right. This was also a 2D mem copy. It's weird that I've been running this for over a month continuously without hitting this problem, and now I'm starting to see it regularly. I might try going back to an earlier file that I've already processed just to see, because maybe this does mean I just need to reboot it. Maybe there's some corrupted RTOS memory or something in the GPU. So, sure. That file's going to go in the wrong directory, but I don't care. And then I don't know how long to wait for this to crash. Well, I've got a cup of tea. I think that's usually how it looks if you crash the GPU and it recovers. Hourglass is ominous. Yeah. Well, okay, that I know that file worked, so maybe this is just a problem with, you know, like maybe there's some internal resource that's leaked on the GPU firmware, and I've just got to reboot the GPU, because I guess it hasn't been completely rebooting every time here. Alright, well, let's reboot the workstation.